The next spring, 1800, the new first consul would cross the Alps for the second Italian campaign against Austria, and the great master, Jacques-Louis David, would take 4 months to paint this version of the event. He and his assistants would paint 5. This is the first and most famous, the signature masterpiece of the exhibition, Napoleon crossing the Alps by the great St. Bernard Pass. David placed him on a dashing charger, rather than the sure-footed mule on which he actually made the crossing. In case anyone might miss the historical significance of the event and its lofty precedents, David shows us the name of Bonaparte in the rocks at lower left, and the name of Hannibal, and beneath it, just visible above the frame in Latin, the name of Charlemagne. Like his ambition and his career, like the Alps themselves, Napoleon soars in the painting. David was sure of the detail of the uniform because he had it brought to his studio. This is that uniform, the one in the painting, and the one actually worn by Napoleon at the Battle of Marengo, the battle that followed his crossing of the Alps, and a victory that would see his popularity rise to even new heights. This black hat, with the distinctive bicorn shape that makes all of us think of him immediately, was the hat he wore at Marengo. That battle, shown here in a Baghetti landscape, saw Napoleon defeat 77,000 Austrians with his 25,000 men, his 15 cannons against their 100. This account of Marengo was prepared by Berthier, Marshal of France, Napoleon's chief of staff, and presented to then Emperor Napoleon on the battle's anniversary in 1804. Now we move into another gallery and make a transition from Napoleon's military glory to his considerable accomplishments as Chief of State, First Consul of France. This is one of those accomplishments, a beautiful black velvet binding of the civil code of the French, creating order from a chaos of confusing laws and policies, recognized for its clarity and flexibility. Known as the Napoleonic Code after 1807, it has served as a model for many other countries and, with changes, is still in use in France today, as it is in the United States, in the state of Louisiana. Another creation of Napoleon as first consul, still in use today, and a truly glorious one at that, is the Legion of Honor, France's most prestigious national order, created in 1802 to recognize military bravery and civilian merit. This incredible piece of gold and enamel, almost identical to Napoleon's own, was presented to Marshal Berthier. Each medallion represents a particular area of achievement. Note the incredible detail in relief, and the eagles, symbols of Napoleon's empire, wearing their own Legion of Honor. In this painting, we see the event that made Napoleon first consul, the meeting of the Council of the 500 at Saint-Cloud on November 10, 1799. Painted by an eyewitness, Jacques Sablé, and completed within 2 hours of the session. Napoleon forced the move of the Assembly from Paris in order that he might control it and determine its outcome. He and his troops were present, and younger brother Lucien was president of the Assembly. Napoleon sent his troops into the Assembly, clearing the hall. In fact, many leapt through the windows to escape. Here is Napoleon at the height of his power as first consul in 1802 in another work by Gros. He had been named first consul for life, with the right to name his successor. He wears the Regent diamond sword, and his hand points to maps of military victories and a list of treaties favorable to France, all his doing. This is one of the few portraits Napoleon actually posed for, Again, remember another grille at the bridge, and Josephine holding her husband still for the sitting. An inscription on the frame tells us that the painting was a gift of Napoleon's to the second consul. The suits he wore as first consul reflected his position, such as the red velvet suit in the portrait, and this suit of red velvet, silk, silver, and gold, also worn on official occasions. Here we see a marvelous allegorical neoclassical work. The first consul, surrounded by beauty and virtue, signs a treaty with England in 1802 at Amiens, while Bellona, the Roman goddess of war, flees at the right, taking darkness and horror with her. The treaty lasted all of 1 year. Now we enter the next gallery, and we enter the council chamber at Malmaison, the country home of Napoleon and Josephine. Completely remodeled and redecorated in only 10 days by the French architects Percier and Fontaine, the chamber filled an urgent need of the first consul for a room to meet with his cabinet while in residence at Malmaison. Designed in the form of a Roman tent supported by spears, doors representing trophy weapons of ancient warrior peoples, the furniture in the room, from the actual council chamber at Malmaison, has been restored through the generosity of the city of Memphis. The carpet, delivered in 1802 to the Palace of Saint-Cloud, was in Josephine's bedroom during the consulate in the Empire, becoming Mary Louise's after the divorce. As we walk through the room, consider the things that happened here. The Legion of Honor was created here in 1802, and later that same year, a treaty was ratified here that transferred the vast territory of Louisiana from Spain to France. Discussion and negotiation on what to do with that territory took place here, and the decision of Napoleon to sell the territory was made here. That decision doubled the size of the United States at the time. On April 30th, 1803, envoys of Thomas Jefferson, Robert Livingston, and James Monroe signed a pact in Paris. These are the original English-language versions of that pact, commonly called the Louisiana Purchase. The United States paid 60 million francs, about $15 million, for the land that now includes 15 of the 50 states, about $1 million a state. Instantly, Napoleon made the United States one of the largest countries in the world. We now leave Malmaison behind, and as we do, we leave the consulate behind as well. Napoleon will convince the Senate, with typical irony, that the way to avoid ever having a king is to have an emperor, and a decree will be issued on May 18th, 1804, entrusting the government to a hereditary emperor, entrusting to history the reign of Emperor Napoleon I. This bust of Barnabas Chiaramonte, Pope Pius VII, is an Antonio Canova original. Even though the Pope was vehemently opposed to Napoleon's imperialistic ambitions, he would accept the invitation to the coronation in 1804. Even though everyone assumed he was invited to crown the emperor, Napoleon would take the crown from the Pope's hands and crown himself and his empress, Josephine. Napoleon would later annex the Papal States and jail the Holy Father. In this small working painting, the master David shows us the moment Napoleon is to crown his empress during the coronation ceremony of December 2nd, 1804, while the Pope and everyone else is relegated to spectator. From this, commissioned by the emperor in 1804, David would take 3 years to complete the huge version in 1807, now hanging in the Louvre, some 20.5 feet by 32 feet. Here is the emperor in his majestic splendor, in his coronation robes, in the original version of the painting by François-Pascal Gérard. So popular that the painter would make numerous copies. At least 10 are known. Of the splendor you see here, only the tunic, the gold-fringed silk sash, the sword, and one leaf of the laurel crown have survived. On the mantle, said to weigh some 80 pounds, look at the golden bees, to become major emblems of the emperor. There, on his staff, we see the eagle with spread wings that we first noticed on the Legion of Honor. And here, of course, is the Legion of Honor in the painting, almost identical to the real thing we saw earlier. These eagles are Napoleonic symbols, surely, but also symbols borrowed from the Emperor Charlemagne. With eagles on his standards, the new emperor seeks to be recognized as the successor to Charlemagne, who laid the foundation for the Holy Roman Empire in the 9th century. Even the bees are borrowed from the same source, symbols of Frankish kings before Charlemagne. Remember, we saw Charlemagne's name in Latin, carved in stone with Napoleon's, in David's painting of the crossing of the Alps at the Great St. Bernard Pass. Further, here is a sketch of a crown commissioned by Napoleon to resemble Charlemagne's, inspired by a medieval monument to the earlier emperor. The crown itself is now in the Louvre. Here, together, are the silk stockings worn by the emperor at the coronation, and the satin slippers with gold embroidery worn by the empress. There are golden bees on the toes. The incredibly ornate coronation saddle of Napoleon, silk velvet, red leather, silver gilt, placed on the back of his horse in the coronation procession, while the emperor rode in a carriage. And one coronation wasn't enough. Here is the coronation portrait of Napoleon as King of Italy, a crown he decided to accept a month after his coronation as emperor, and formally accepted in the Milan Cathedral on May 26, 1805. Approach the throne room and look about you. Here is Napoleon's throne from the Legislative Assembly, one of 4 of his thrones to survive. This one has been slightly modified. Napoleon's seal was removed from the back by King Louis XVIII during the restoration of the Bourbon monarchy. Below it, and to the right, is Josephine's ceremonial armchair from the Legislative Assembly, where she would join her husband for the sessions, gilt wood and velvet in the Empire style. Both the throne and the armchair were made and delivered by François-Honoré Georges Jacob Desmoulins in the fall of 1804, similar to work he had done for the throne rooms of the Tuileries and Saint-Cloud palaces. He was one of 2 brothers who made the chairs we saw earlier in the council chamber of Malmaison. The carpet is a period replica of the carpet in the throne room of the Tuileries, made as a gift to the King of Saxony from Napoleon in 1809, and the only carpet surviving to still have all the emblems of the empire. The letter N in the center. These winged symbols in the corners, with the lightning bolts of Jupiter.